Fantastic. So thank you everyone for joining us, all of our panelists. My name is Nicole Carpenter. I'm the Director of Programs and Education at the Westport Museum for History and Culture. As always, we do offer this program for you tonight for free. We do have a suggested donation for our programs, but we do ask that you support the museum and our fellow organizations that are here with us tonight, however you can during this difficult time. If you are enjoying our programming, we do ask that you like us on Facebook and follow us on our other social media accounts. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Westport History and on Instagram at Westport History Museum. And if you have any questions or comments that you would like to share with our program this evening, please enter them into the chat function. I will monitor these and we will get to as many of them as we can at the end of our program that we have for you tonight. So this evening, we are discussing the museum's Westport in Focus Oral History Project. This began early in March as a long lens oral history related to the experiences of Westporters and those who work in Westport during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this project is continuing and will continue to morph into the future. But tonight we wanted to discuss some of the profiles that were featured in this project and how it will continue. So tonight I am joined by Jerri Graham, a photographer here in Westport, as well as Ramin Ganeshram, who is the Executive Director of the museum. We also have Harold Bailey, who is the Team Westport Diversity Chairman here in Westport, as well as Michael Barker, who's the Westport Country Playhouse Managing Director, Jen Tooker, Westport's second Selectperson, and we have Lisa Laudico, I'm so sorry, Lisa, Laudico, who is a metastatic breast cancer survivor and activist who was one of our profiles during our program. So thank you all for joining me this evening. The first thing that we'd like to discuss during our program, it might be a bit more for Ramin and Jerri. Just as we started this program, why did we launch this program? Why was this something that the museum felt that it was vital to launch during this pandemic? And why was it launched so early into the closure of many Westport businesses, including the museum?
So I'll answer that. It really, in a way, it was part kismet, part it really came about organically. So we closed the museum the same day that Westport schools closed. And we are fortunate enough that our museum associate is actually Jerri Graham's daughter. And Jerri's a longtime friend of mine. And in speaking, you know, she had just called, we were just talking about everything that was going on, the craziness. And Jerri's a very gifted photographer. And she said, wouldn't it be great if there was a way to just kind of, you know, mark this time, because it's crazy and it's unusual and it's history happening all around us. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know, yeah, it would be. I said, that's what we call an oral history. Historians do it all the time. It's the on the ground discussion with people about what's happening around them or what's happened in their past. It's a way for us to get a primary resource documentation about history as it happens, or through the eyes of those who have lived it. And so my first reaction was, but we can't do that because of COVID-19. We can't be near people. We can't be with them to interview them, which is the traditional way to do it. You're with the person, you're interviewing them. You know, perhaps some of the most famous oral histories that people who are tuning in might be aware of is during the Federal Writers Project during the Great Depression as part of the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes went through the South, and they took the then new uber high-tech, uber cutting-edge technology of recording devices that went to records to take slave narratives of people who had been enslaved, the last remaining people who had been enslaved, which are some of them digitized now and available through the Library of Congress. So that's what we think about. You go, you sit with a person, you talk to them. Of course, that couldn't be done. And it was Jerri who said, well, why can't we take it from a distance? I have a telephoto lens. We could take the pictures. You could talk to them on the phone. They could fill out a questionnaire. And of course, you know, she was completely right. And so that's why, because the technology enabled us to move so quickly, we were able to do it so fast. And we, if you all remember, we didn't know how long it would be. At first, they were saying that schools would be closed for 2 weeks. So we thought, okay, this is a 2-week project, a 3-week project. And we wanted to get to it quickly rather than taking, you know, the amount of time that it might have normally taken, and then it would have been over. Lo and behold, of course, that's not the case. So I'll let Jerri kind of speak to also her motivation of even bringing it up to me.
I really am not a fan of Zoom, and I'm looking at myself, but not looking at myself. I think pardon?
Eyeglass wardrobe change.
I know. Did you see that? But no, I just finished up doing this breast cancer portrait project with Aware, and I just realized how important that was in terms of, you know, people having an image that they didn't take with their iPhone, and something that captures them, because people take selfies and people take photos of themselves and their kids, but to like take an image that is, you know, we don't have dates on our cameras. Pictures used to have the little dates on the bottom. We don't have that anymore, but now this is that image of somebody where in front of their house or their business, it's positioning them here at that place in time, in this period. And I think that oftentimes thinking that we're getting our news and our experience of people through the internet and, you know, what people are writing on Facebook, but this would be an effort that would be slightly different, because I know I have big ideas, but I love to have, you know, people who actually know what they're doing, helping to orchestrate it and doing the real hard work. And there's my daughter, who was my was part of this, and Ramin, who knows how to put everything together and made just like something that would have just been, for me, have been like, oh, I'm going to take a photo, but to make it a full rounded out project was really important, because I know that there are other photographers who are doing, you know, porch projects and, you know, doing it for this, that, and the other. But I know, and I actually, another photographer in town criticized me for doing this, and said, oh, nobody should be doing this and that. And she got on social media, and it really hurt my feelings and hurt me, because I was thinking, I'm just trying to do something because, one, we need to stay connected. And I think that I also started noticing that as soon as those face masks started coming on, people stopped looking at one another, and they stopped like going to Trader Joe's before, like they imposed the limits on people. We were just like becoming these animals behind our masks. And I felt like, okay, if we're going to do this, if through a portrait on a person's front porch, most of the times they're in the clothes, that they're going to get them unmasked, and that we can see the stories and the people who are behind the doors and behind them don't see, or that we had started to like dehumanize, because we stopped seeing fully who we are when we mouth. And my mouth talks too much. I said, yeah. All right.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's all.
We do have some questions for our other panelists who have so kindly joined us, who all filled out and were actually a part of this project, who had their photograph taken and were kind enough to fill out the profile and were featured on our project page. And one of the first questions I have for you all, and feel free to go in whichever order you would like, to tell us just a bit more about your experience during the process. Did you feel that it was a good process? Would you have preferred something different? How long did it take during your process? And did you feel that it was helpful to you?
Who wants to go first? Well, I'm happy to jump in. So first of all, the process was incredibly well organized. So hats off to the entire team, Ramin and Nicole and Kat. At the outset, it seemed really simple to just raise your hand and volunteer. And of course, the time spent with Jerri is never a chore. So she could have spent all afternoon hanging out with us. That's no problem. It was like, whoa, people, yay, Jerri, awesome. So the process of being photographed as a family was super fun. And of course, Jerri's an incredibly generous photographer and can make anybody look great. And she really tries to capture the essence of whatever's going on. So, I mean, so it was the easiest thing to do, first off. But the other piece that I think is important is it spoke to the moment. And I think that the questions that you all devised to ask the people who participated in the project were really thoughtful. And it gave me an opportunity to put onto paper some of the emotions and the feelings that I was having. And it gave us an opportunity to sort of say, or share our love for our town. And that's really the essence of it for me. I've lived here 13 years. It's the longest I've lived in any one place, except maybe my childhood home, but certainly in my adult life, this is the longest place I've ever lived. And I feel like what Jerri was saying is that, you know, hiding behind the masks, and I think for a lot of us, and I don't speak for anyone but myself, but for those that are immunocompromised, we feel super isolated. So there was that I felt was an important thing to highlight, so that people who were sort of not so sure about what the town of Westport was recommending that we needed to do for our own safety, for the whole community's safety, that there are people that may not look like they're sick or immunocompromised, but are really at risk. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to say those things and to share my love for this town and for all of you. So that's pretty much how I felt about the whole project. It was just a gift of love, truly.
Can I jump in a minute? Because Lisa, you said something that was so interesting to me. You said it was a project of the moment. In that it really addressed a very current need. And so, you know, of course, I want everybody to have the opportunity to answer Nicole's original question, but I want to take the opportunity, which I didn't say, which is to say, because it is a project of the moment, we're evolving this project. Now, the idea was always that this would be a jumping off point to an oral history platform, that we would go on in the future and continue to do oral histories in this way. What we realized sooner than later, we thought that, again, just like we didn't think COVID would last as long as it has, we thought that movement to other topics would happen later as well. But obviously the events of the last 10 days in America, you know, the protests to voice the rightful outrage about police brutality against Black Americans and racial injustice, is now the crisis, the co-crisis of the moment. So it made us realize that at large we need to expand this project to allow people to speak to COVID, certainly, speak to the protests and the current climate of racial inequity in America, or anything they want to speak about. You know, we have a lot of people telling us, I grew up in Westport. It's not the same town. When I grew up in Westport, it was like this, or what, and that may be good, bad, or indifferent. Those people as well. So you're exactly right when you say that it is a project of the moment, and we hope to use it for this purpose now, moving forward. So I put that out there before we go on to whosoever would like to speak next about how the project went for you, and if you feel that it adequately allowed you to represent what you were thinking at that point in time.
I'll go next. I mean, the process was easy. The photograph took about 5 minutes. In fact, Jerri, we wanted you to come back.
I'll come back next week.
No, but it was very quick. You did a great job. You took several photos in about 5 minutes from a distance, and I couldn't believe how quick that was. The next piece was the questions. Some of the questions at the time didn't seem like they were questions I wanted to answer. Not because I couldn't, not because they didn't get at what was really important to me at the moment. And I really appreciate the fact that Ramin modified the questions so that we were able to get at some of the things that were really on our minds at the time. Also, we got into more than just, here's what I think now. We got into why did we move here? What's our association with the town? And that kind of thing to me was very important. So, and that process was tremendous. It caused us to actually reflect on a number of things we hadn't thought about we've been here for 30 years plus. And a number of things that we hadn't thought about probably since we've been here, because you just live here and you do things. So it was great.
I'll pipe up. I participated in this project mostly because Ramin asked me to. I thought it was.
So do we all.
Great. Yeah. She's a good arm twister. Didn't have to twist very hard. I took the opportunity to use this as an educational tool. A lot of what Mark Lamos and I talk about, at least since COVID's been a thing, is that it's hard to describe to someone who doesn't work in our industry what's going on in our industry because it is so dire. But to Ramin's point earlier, I mean, I think if you asked me these questions today, I would have something different to say. We just spent 2 hours today in an all-staff meeting talking about the Playhouse's response to the killing of George Floyd, and to what extent the Playhouse really can own that kind of response as a white supremacist organization. So, I mean, it just in the week, it has completely shifted. We are not talking internally about, I mean, we are sort of underneath talking about reopening, all the things that go along with that, but absolutely the focus of the country and the focus of the world has changed, you know, where our mindset is with regard to what's to history happening, right?
Ramin, you unmuted, so I didn't know if you were going to respond to something with Michael there or not. No, okay, all right. So I'll add my 2 cents here. I don't know anybody who gets a phone call or a DM from Jerri and says no.
I love you, Jennifer too.
Let me just start with that, Jerri Graham.
My future running mate. We've decided one day we're going to take over the world and we're going to form a new party. It's going to be a revolution of beauty and grace. Okay. But that's an aside. Go ahead.
And talent.
President and vice president. But go ahead.
So I think I was one of the earliest, or on the early side. And was so thrilled to be asked. And like I said, I jumped at the opportunity. And to be clear, not only because of Jerri and the museum, but also, I thought it was, I have to say, I did pretty much know we were going to be closed down for a while. So, at that point, it felt like this was really going to be a long haul for the community and for all of us as individuals and families. And so for me, I thought this was just going to be such a wonderful way, not only as an experience as a family, because to kind of come together and talk about some important things, in the moment, but also to connect all of us through what turned out to be, really 2 months. And not connect just through the photos, which were absolutely fabulous, but the written pieces. I mean, I did not actually read every single one that was posted, but I read so many, and I met so many new people, right? And I think I'm only here 12 years, so I guess I'm the relative newcomer of the group. But in the job I do, I feel like I know a lot of people in town, and I feel like it's my job to be accessible to as many people as I can be, as from the standpoint of residents and business owners. But I met all these wonderful new people, and to have them sort of just through their narratives, just share all the different experiences they were having, and there was no right or wrong answer, right? That's what's so beautiful about this project, was there was no, people were just able to answer with such, clarity in the moment, for lack of a better word. And it was, the questions were fabulous, Ramin. The idea, is fabulous. Thank you to both of you. I think this is a treasure for us from a standpoint of not only in the moment, staying connected and getting to know each other in a different way than we had been able to know each other before, but certainly in a way that we look back as a community and think about, what was really important to people at this moment in time, where it was just such an overused but true word right now, so unprecedented. So just a very big thank you from the Tooker family, and as an elected leader in town, I think that we will be blessed to have this documentation of this time.
Thank you. I think that's, the point you make. You said two things that I think people watching would really like to know, which is that the profiles are people's own words. We do not edit them except for, grammar, obviously. Not to say that people don't speak grammatically correctly, but the way we speak versus the way, we write and so on. So I have to say, I've been a writer for, oh my God, it's almost 30 years. And I need a copy editor, right? So everybody needs a copy editor. So we only copy edit it. We don't change the substance of what anybody says ever. And I just want to be clear, regardless of what someone says, right? We're not there to judge their opinion in that way. Obviously, if something is aggressive or offensive, then that's a different, discussion, right? But if somebody had said to us, I think masks are silly, we would let them say that. That is their opinion. The other piece of it is the last thing that you said, the real purpose of this. So we're so pleased that it's created a connection through the town. We are really hopeful that by opening it up to other topics, it creates an even greater connection where people feel it's a safe environment to talk about things that really need to finally be discussed out in the open. But the real purpose of it is the thing that you said last, which is this is a historical record for future generations to be able to look back at, future researchers, and that might even be only 5 years from now, right? Or it could be 50 years from now, and not guess what people felt, and not guess what they thought, and not guess what they were doing. Actually know from their own mouth, right? And that is a rare gift that historians and researchers and journalists don't always have. So we know that it's incredibly important.
And I want to just add something. I just want to add one thing, because I want to thank one who was involved with this, because during even the middle and even now, this has been, as Michael can attest to, when you're in the creative fields, money is not always prominent. So this was a very uncertain time for me. And I think that being of use and of service saved my life in so many ways. And I get emotional about it, but seeing people I never, would have met before if it had not been for this. Just like with the Project for Aware, I meet people through my camera and we have conversations that, I normally wouldn't have had. Somebody just tried to call me, sorry, that I normally wouldn't have had. So I'm very, very grateful. Like today I met the new principal at Staples. I never would have met him because I don't have a child at Staples anymore, but just an absolute delightful man and a treasure that I hope this town takes full advantage of and respects. And so I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to see Jen again and Lisa. These are women and people who I count as, not just people I've met, but as friends who I care about. And this has just given me another glimpse into their lives and who they are. So I am grateful for everyone who participated. I'm so sorry. I'm a crybaby too. Okay. That's all.
Thank you all. I feel that all of you touched on this a bit about why you chose to share your experiences. And as this project continues, why do you feel it's important to have a platform like this? Obviously, I know Ramin and I hold this very dear as a resource, but what would this resource mean to the community and its importance in that way?
Take a stab at it. I'm a big believer, and clearly my career has something to do with this, in the power of storytelling. That reading facts on a page or reading an article about something is not as powerful to human beings as an emotionally connected narrative. And these stories are only interconnected in as much as they are contemporaneous. But taken as a whole, they are a narrative about this specific place, this very complex, interesting, imperfect and special place where I make my living and where most of you live. So I think that unto itself is enough reason to collect these stories, because there's a power. I mean, it's to what Jen said. I don't necessarily feel like I'm more connected to people because of this, but I feel that this is a tool for connectivity, right?
There's the question of, if not this, then what? In terms of leaving some kind of a record for what people were thinking. Because the question is, what the hell are we thinking right now? We're in a basically all-white town. We're talking about Black Lives Matter. You go down and you look at Urban Outfitters, and we're with Black Lives Matter. Where a week ago, that would have been damn near unthinkable. So what caused the change? Where are people really coming from when they say that? What does it really mean? And when you get down to the depth of that, what's it going to mean in a month? What's it going to mean in 3 months or 4 months out? There's a way to really start calibrating the way some of these things morph over time. Is it a flavor of the month, or is this something that's going to be lasting? And if there's going to be change, what kind of change is going to be? And what do people really think about it? There's just so much here. There's so many more dimensions you can have with this, which is what I think Michael was getting into with the storytelling, than you can with just, blam, here are the facts.
Which is, of course, what we've learned as museum professionals, right? Like we have lots of facts and we have lots of documents and it often just goes in one ear and out the other. People, even, I was a journalist for almost 25 years, and that was the kiss of death, was to lead with a number or lead with a fact. People wouldn't read it. You have to lead with a story. And that's what we've tried to do with our exhibits in the last 2.5, 3 years. And I think that, that is apparent in this project, which we hope one day will eventually, fuel an exhibit of some kind when people can be in the same place.
Well, I would also add, I think with this.
But I think also this project does.
Go ahead, Jen.
You. No, go Jen.
No, I was just going to say, I think that the other piece to this project that I think is wonderful is because of the size of our community. Not only is the endeavor of storytelling very, very powerful, the reality is people's stories, people know each other, right? So you really want to, when you sort of see somebody that you actually know, you want to hear their story and their words too. So it's the connectivity of the people involved as well as the storytelling concept that I think makes for a really powerful mix for this platform.
Jerri, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, go ahead. Ramin was going to say something, I think.
Well,
we were just, actually, Ramin and I were talking about our next upcoming project. We were talking about what Harold was talking about documenting even the Black lives that are here in Westport. And this has been something where we had mentioned it back when there was the exhibition at the museum, because the original inhabitants, or the original Black people that lived here, were enslaved people. And so our next form of the project, we had talked about it before all of this happened, before another Black man was murdered, was trying to document the lives of the Black people who have lived here, moved here, raised their families here by choice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that we're often, you know, not put in the history books after the civil rights movement, you know, but our stories continue on. And so I would love for that to be one of our next continuing projects.
That's a great segue.
Sorry.
Unless you had something, Lisa.
You know, I completely agree with Jerri. And I think it would be a really wonderful project. It's the only thing I wanted to add just on that last piece that we were talking about is that, yes, we're a small town-ish, we're a small-ish town. And we do, for those of us who've lived here and perhaps have children through the school system, you really do get to know different groups of people. But as Jen said, do we really know everybody's story? So I think that's what Michael was saying too. It's just like the power of the real story. It's like all of a sudden we aren't meeting people on the beach because we weren't really allowed to. So, or we're not just running into people at Trader Joe's like maybe we used to, but even in those interactions, were we really getting into that deep conversation? And you're right, Jen, we weren't, and you don't. And that's why this kind of project is incredibly powerful, because we can all say, you know, be sure you're kind and make sure that you never assume what that person, what shoes they're walking in. But here we're throwing open the curtains into little segments of people's lives. And so to what Jerri is just saying about sort of the next phase, it's so important to tell all the stories, right? And so if this gets an opportunity and this becomes a format, and I hope it is, it's just so incredibly valuable. And it makes our town feel even more intimate and more real, so that it's not just superficial, like, isn't this a beautiful place with all these bright, shiny people who must have the world by the tail. And there's a lot of truth to that, because it is a really beautiful place and there's lots of really awesome people, but there's more to all of these people's stories. And I think that I think you guys are going to do awesome work, because it's a great idea.
Just on that subject of the continuing nature of this project is going to continue, as Ramin spoke about a bit, and I do hope she'll expand on that towards the end of our program. Are there topics that I'm sure that Harold and Michael, both Lisa and Jennifer and Jerri, you could all speak to topics that you would like to see addressed in the future? Are there larger themes and histories that should be expanded upon in a project such as this as it continues?
Harold, go ahead, because you are nodding.
We've got a laundry list fall out of this. I mean, obviously, some of mine because of Team Westport's focus. It's going to be based on, some of it's based on race. One is, why does Westport look the way it does? And when you just take that and you break it down, was it housing? And if it's housing, why was the housing done the way it was done? And what's the history behind things like restrictive covenants in town? What's the history behind the school system and the fact that we had open choice, I think it was, back in the 1970s. And there were a lot of stories then that were really amazing, in the way that kids who came from Bridgeport here in far greater numbers than they come now had an impact on the kids that were living in Westport at the time. And there was a lot more interchange that went on. And in fact, some of those folks are still friends later in life. Who belongs in Westport? You could just topics like that opened it up to the people who work here, belong here. Are they the Westporters, as well as the people who actually live in Westport? Are there certain sections of Westport that are more Westport than the other sections? You know, there are all kinds of things you can get in if you really want to be real and get into some areas that don't get talked about a lot. That pulls up the covers from what is on the surface, this high gloss, wonderful land of milk and honey in Westport. And it isn't to say that that isn't there. It's to say, let's get real about some things that we might want to talk about that might help us be closer to that for everybody.
And just to plus one, those stories are told, right? We know those stories. I've only been in town 4 years, and I know a lot of those stories. And I know those contemporary stories of wonderful, beautiful, shiny, interesting people. There are so many. But the privilege that we have in Fairfield County and in Westport and where I live, I mean, it's we are able to tell the other stories, right? Because because the shiny story is already told, we can tell all the stories, right? So that's clearly the historians get to curate which stories are being told, and I know that Ramin is going to intentionally look for those stories that maybe we're not already telling. But I think it's because of the milk and honey that's already flowing in a lot of places that we can look at stuff that's maybe not as interesting on its face, or not as attractive on its face.
Well, I totally agree with what Harold and Michael just said. I think that it's really important to dig into those stories. Obviously, hyper local news are really, we've lost a little bit of that. And so it's very important to tell those stories that don't get on the big national news scene. But also I think that history is the teacher for how we go forward. And, Westport's been around for a long time. So we should look at that, because we have those stories. I loved, Harold, your ideas of, the open choice program. I think that's a really brilliant one to look at. And there's just so many other things. But in this moment, I think we're called upon to do the work, to do the learning of what's really happened, and not just be on autopilot, like, oh yeah, this is, our town is pretty, has, done a nice job with our protesting and so forth. But let's really dig in and really understand what's going on in our town, what have been the decisions made in the past, and so we can make the right ones going forward and ask the right questions as citizens of this town that we love, and be good citizens within all the communities in Fairfield County. So I could go on, but I won't. But I just wanted to concur with what Harold and Michael said.
Well, I think to that end, where I was talking about, I was just writing something the other day, actually today, about the fact that in this town, most people, they'll march in a protest, which is fantastic, like you were saying, Lisa, but at the end of the day, very few people actually have day-to-day interactions with Black people unless they work at the grocery store or clean their house. And we know that that's a truth. And I think that oftentimes, I know that I'm not the only Black person in Westport, and I know that I have probably a good 10 people I call like good friends. And I'm not having people clamoring down my door asking me to socialize. It's because oftentimes we are not seen in our society and in our community as being here. When we, and so I think that visually and orally representing those particular stories right now is extremely important, because I can't tell you how many times I've been like ready to finish my address, and I'll say 355 Main Street, and they'll say, Bridgeport? I'm like, no, I don't live in Bridgeport, because you assume I'm, as a Black woman, shopping at a store in Main Street in Westport, in the town where I've lived since 2007, I can't be from here. And so I know that that's happened at least a dozen times. And that shouldn't be the case. I should be able to live wherever I want to live and not have anyone question it or have to prove that I live here, to a clerk at a store. So I think that, I want people to recognize us. And my friend, she was telling me the other day how parents on the soccer field will, they don't engage. She's a parent. she has children playing, but they're not going to engage with her because she's a Black woman they've seen since her children have been in kindergarten, but she's not seen as being that. So I think that's where I personally, as a photographer, would like to focus. So we can not point, but it's like, see me. This is my son. So, you know, no officer in Westport or nobody in Westport or the resource officer at Staples is going to try to put a knee on my child's neck because you have seen me. You have seen my child as a child of Westport. You know, because there have been times where Black children in Westport have been, you know, followed by the cops. And Catherine has even talked about one time she was out with her beau, this guy that she started seeing, and it's really cute. And so, and how a police car pulled close to them, and how she felt uncomfortable because a young Black man.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like we need to show our faces. And I know I'm not the only one. Harold, you're the second one. No, we're here. We're here. So, okay.
Two of us.
No, there are 8. No.
I think, you know, I think here's the point. You know, what I would really love anyone watching this, or the people who watch it after it's a live recording, or the people who tell their people that they watched it, to come away with the fact that these stories have to be told in the first person so that they are made clear, and they have to be told abundantly. You know, it's funny, I often tell people, you know, when a story like this is told and somebody says is shocked, I often say, really, you're shocked? Why? And that in itself is a story. Why are you shocked, right? Because we need to unpack that, right? We need to unpack your shock at this happening when there's plenty of evidence around you that it does happen. So to have a person who is your neighbor, whose child does go to school with your children, who works and commutes on the train with you, saying, here is my experience, it's not so easy to ignore at that point, right? That's what we found with this project. When people, you know, Lisa, when you talked about your experiences as an immune compromised person, and how, you know, very poignantly you wrote about, you know, that might mean you're not the first person to get the most advanced care, because you know, for a medical practitioner trying to weigh, you know, all of these things in terms of, you know, longevity and viability and so on. And that was very moving. And so it's one thing to say that, you know, in the third person, to have someone tell you, I know this about myself, that stays with you. So that's why I'm trying to strongly encourage, you know, my fellow people of color in this town, please join this project, please. So that, as Jerri says, we can be seen, right? And so not just people of color, people who have health issues, people who work in the town and feel not comfortable, you know, getting to their job, being at their job, and getting home from their job. You know, people who might feel like, you know, they've been here for a long time and there's no place for them anymore. You know, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the story doesn't have to be pretty, and it doesn't have to be polished for us to allow you to tell it. We are going to give you a platform, so please participate.
Ramin, to that end, from a participation standpoint, what is your thinking around multi-generational storytelling and giving different generations and different age groups their ability to tell their story at this time?
So we're extremely interested in that. We did make an effort to try to get the Staples graduating class of this year to participate in a set of questions that was specifically for them. We understand why we didn't get a lot of interest in that. It's a difficult time. Things are very uncertain. They're probably very tired of writing down answers to things. So you know, there's not a lot of desire to participate, but we're hoping that as the summer wears on and time wears on, you know, they might feel it's more important to do so. We did try something new today. You'll see it coming up pretty soon, where in fact, it was Catherine, our museum associate, was at the protest today, and we asked her to take pictures with her phone. We're hoping some of her mother's photography genes have rubbed off on her, and record some really brief interviews that might only be a paragraph or 2 paragraphs about why are you here, why are you doing this today, and specifically, can you try to find people of multiple generations, across racial lines, and so on. So we're very, very interested in that. I think one of our best profiles was Larry Untermeyer, who is going to be 92 next month, as it happens. And gosh, I used maybe 1/10 of what he told me. Like, that man can tell a story, right? And I said to him, well, I'm going to keep all the rest of it and put it in the file for the museum because it's important, right? So yes, it's a great question, Jen. And again, whoever's watching now or watching later, do not be hindered by your age or anything else,
So, Ramin, would you speak to how this project is going to continue? We all have voiced some of the topics that we'd like to see explored, and I think any of those are great topics to begin with. Is there a topic that that is going to be pushed first, or are all topics open? How is this project going to continue and expand?
So currently, the topic that we have reorganized. So people are clear. What happens is you let us know you want to participate. Then we send you the link to a questionnaire, which we ask you to fill out with great detail. Not a sentence or 2, at least a paragraph, a few lines. Take your time to think about it. Once that's done, we schedule Jerri's time to go and take your picture. So there's a couple of changes. From a practical point of view, when this started, people were home. So the pictures were at their home. So now we would love to take pictures of people at their place of business, maybe just on the street, maybe visiting a cafe that is now open that they now want to go back to, playing sports, at the beach, at a protest, whatever the case may be. We'll let people have the freedom within, the safety precautions for COVID, because it is still with us, have a long lens picture taken. The questionnaire has been adapted a couple of days ago to have the protests and the murder of George Floyd and questions of racial inequity be the top line questions. They're equal with the COVID questions. And then there's a last question that asks people to say, and we put this in the directions as well, talk about whatever you would like to talk about. We do feel that the current socio-political climate in the country is the most pressing and urgent need to be discussed. We feel it is pressing and urgent to be discussed in this town and others like it all across the country. So that is how the shift is currently happening. And of course, this opportunity to talk about whatever you would like to talk about. I can tell you the museum has made a commitment that these questions about equity and access and justice, I think, will probably remain in every oral history we do from now to the time that we don't have to ask them, which I don't believe is going to be in my lifetime, certainly, but that is the plan.
And Ramin or Jerri or Nicole, will the final product still look the same as it has before? So a picture capturing people's words in their own words, posting on a website, sharing with the community via other platforms. So is that does that piece still remain the same from a standpoint of how you're going to currently share the information with the community?
Yeah, so that will be the same, because we find that it is the most equitable form of access for people. Even if the museum was open, which it is not, we're working, but the building isn't open. It's very unlikely that whether it were an exhibit or housed in our archives, which it will be as a print product as well, you know, not everybody could come down and look at it, right? So the purpose of that obviously will be for researchers. It might turn out, depending on, you know, already we have well over 60 profiles. As it grows, we might, and it is a page on a website, it might become its own website, completely independent just for these profiles. But, you know, technology being what it is, who knows what, you know, amazing, great thing might happen a year from now, 2 years from now. And I hope the
We
project
have
is
talked
still
about the
going on. And
podcast. Let's do the podcast next.
yeah, so a
Don't
couple of
forget
things that we're talking about is, yeah, we're potentially talking about doing podcasts as a way to quite literally do an oral history interview with people. Michael and I are talking about doing almost, it's very, very nascent. We're really just talking about it now, doing a series, a virtual series, not unlike The Moth, if any of you are familiar with The Moth, which is essentially an oral history, storytelling, performance platform where somebody speaks and tells their story in a very, I don't want to call it theatrical way, but a very engaging way, sort of like a TED Talk, if anyone hasn't seen The Moth, but has seen the TED Talk. So we're talking about that as well, you know, partnering with the Playhouse to use their considerable skill in coaching and bringing people along to be able to present in that way, which is not easy to do. No matter how great your story is, you kind of have to be a good storyteller as well. So that's another another potential way that we'll be rolling this out. So we're really moving to a place where we feel that this project is really foundational to this parallel interpretation of history, where we interpret the past and we connect it continuously to the present, and then hopefully to the future, and using this very specific primary source material from the present to both balance and counterbalance and demonstrate how the events of the past have played out today, frankly, as Harold has alluded to. Why does Westport look like it does? You know, why, for example, does a town like Westport, how did we flatten the curve? How were we able to have such early and uniform compliance? You know, as a historian, I would say to you, it has a lot to do with the socioeconomic condition of the town and our ability to work virtually, right? And a number of other factors. But you know, I think you can't, you know, to really understand that, you have to understand the history as well, and obviously about all these other topics. I will say this, because I know we're coming to the end, so I want to make sure I say this. Many people, hopefully, in this audience will have come to the museum to have seen the exhibit that we did in 2018 and 2019 called Remember the History of African Americans in Westport, for which we won state, regional, and national awards for that exhibit. Many people have come to us in this last week saying, can you reinstall the exhibit? Which is, we love to hear that. It's not that easy to reinstall an exhibit of that scope. It is currently, we do have it online in a web platform that is really great on a phone, but is not so great on a website, and it's very difficult and clunky. So we're going to be spending the next week actually rebuilding the whole exhibit, not in life, but on a dedicated page on the virtual museum site, which is much more visual and interactive, and adding content to it as well. And we'll be rolling that out in the next week or so that people, and it ties into this in that we will be seeking the oral histories of people who lived through the civil rights movement in Westport, who were involved with Project Concern and the intercommunity camp. People now going to protest, people just speaking about their experience living in Westport as a Black Westporter. So this is how we're going to use this project to supplement the revival, if you will, of that exhibit, which we're gratified to know that people not only remember, but would like to see again.
I want to thank all of our panelists for being with us. If there's anything any of you would like to add that we didn't have a chance to discuss during our program, do feel free to add something now if you would like to.
You have to make a donation to the museum. If you're watching this, you are benefiting. I'm the nonprofit guy on here. If you're watching this, you're benefiting from the good work of Ramin and the entire team, Nicole, Jerri, and it costs money. So go to their donate page and make a donation now.
Thank you, Mike.
Amen.
Shameless plug. Love it.
And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for a wonderful initiative. That's probably not the right and most perfect word for it, but thank you for taking on making sure we're documenting for history the times we've just lived through for the last couple of months and going forward. I really think this will be something that our community will be proud of, but also really be grateful for. And I think the conversations that will occur as a result will be really fabulous as well. And so thank you very much for all the work you're doing on behalf of Westport and the community.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the support. We really appreciate it.
I would also encourage you to be resilient, because you're going to be breaking a lot of glass and you're going to get a lot of pushback that some of these things are not pleasant, or they're not what we thought they were. And so it's changing our perceptions, and it's ruining the brand, and it's doing all kinds of things. But I think exactly as what Jim just said, long term, people are going to look back and go, this is incredible. This stuff that happened, but the fact that we have the record, and I trust we will grow from what you're able to put together here.
Thank you, Harold.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It was a gift to us and to everyone involved.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And I would just like to say one thing. Tucker Graham 2028. Or Graham Tucker.
This is a nonprofit museum. No political endorsement.
Sorry.
Please.
2028, 2030. I don't know.
Well,
Get those
thank you
editing tools
all.
out. Sure.
Well, thank you all so much. We do fully anticipate continuing this project, expanding this project to cover all of the topics that we've discussed this evening. Our focus right now is really on the current situation in our country and across the globe. We know that this is an international topic as well. So we do thank you, everyone who has participated and hopefully will participate in the future. Your thoughts are what make this project possible. We also want to reiterate that we encourage everyone to participate, whether you live in Westport, work in Westport, or previously worked in Westport. We did have a question from our audience asking those who have moved away from Westport whether they are eligible to participate, and we want those thoughts as well. So please do participate in any capacity that you can. So again, thank you all for joining me this evening. Thank you to all of our viewers, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks. Bye. Bye, guys.